The ayes to the right, 369. The noes to the left, 126.
The ayes to the right, 369. The noes to the left, 126. So the ayes have it, unlocked.
Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That was the sound of the end of British liberty. A sound that rang out all over the world, frankly, today. I've been getting messages from all over the place saying, what the hell is going on? How did the British Parliament vote for COVID vaccine passports today, despite all the evidence that shows that they don't work, despite the government's own evidence in the United Kingdom that they don't work, despite pledges and promises from Boris Johnson's government that this would never happen? No, there were four votes maybe today in the UK Parliament. Mask mandates, vaccines for national health care workers, COVID passport regulations. Yes, we'll get into all of that today and more. It's Tuesday, December 14th, the year of our Lord 2021. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor of the National Pulse. Welcome to the show. Speaking of welcome to the show, I want to bring in now to discuss this with me the chairman of the Bow Group, the world's oldest conservative think tank based out of the United Kingdom. You've heard him on this show before. Benjamin Harris-Quinney joins us. Ben, welcome back, even under these terrible circumstances. Glad to have you on because we've been talking about this for quite some time now, and the backdrop, I think, of these votes that were hastily put in front of the British Parliament today is just as interesting as the repercussions that these votes will have themselves. So welcome, and how did we get here?
Thank you. Well, like with most similar issues, it has been a slow drift. And indeed, we are still hearing, oh, don't worry, these vaccine passports are only for large events. They're only for going abroad. They're only for certain forms of work. And of course, as we know, this is always how these things start, with the incremental salami slicing. And before you know it, you've got a barcode tattooed on your head. It's been an interesting evening because whilst you are absolutely right to put it in those dour terms, there was a rebellion by the Prime Minister's own party of 98 Conservative MPs voting against, and I think 126 not voting for, which is the largest party rebellion since same-sex marriage. And after same-sex marriage, Cameron lost control of his party and Nigel Farage surged, and that's how we got Brexit. So that rebellion is much, much larger than the government were expecting, than really anyone was expecting. People were talking in terms of 50. Right. So it is a huge rebellion, and whilst they've won the vote technically only with the support of the opposition, which I think is a disgrace.
So let me just slow you down here. Let me just slow you down here, because there'll be a lot of the audience that doesn't know how any of these things work. So let's just explain those things for a second. Boris Johnson was elected with a massive majority, much to my chagrin, much to your chagrin, just a couple of years ago, elected as the leader of the Conservative Party, and then put it to a vote to the British public in a general election, won this majority. I said at the time, and I know you said at the time, you can't trust Britain's Conservative Party, which is nothing like a Conservative Party, for those that aren't aware out there, with such a whopping majority in the House of Commons, because they will end up abusing it and doing the same thing that they have been doing for so many decades now, which is failing to represent the British public and failing to be conservative. And so today what you're saying is that the Conservative Party, the rebellion inside the Conservative Party, was actually so large that it was larger than the Prime Minister's parliamentary majority, and he had to rely on the far-left Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens or whoever else to prop his COVID vaccine mandates and mask mandate legislation up.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for US listeners, if you want to understand where Boris Johnson sits politically, it's pretty much where Joe Biden sits. Or if you think of an Angela Merkel figure, technically they're called conservatives, but they're in no way conservative. The proper conservatives in the United Kingdom are represented by people like Nigel Farage. But even with that considered, there is still a rump of genuine conservatives within the Conservative Party, and this rebellion has gone beyond them to a wider swathe of the party. And it is generally considered that if a prime minister can only pass legislation with the support of the opposition, he has lost authority over his party, and that's usually the beginning of the end of a leader.
So what is the backdrop to this? Because we had been told, assured, I remember watching interviews with Sajid Javid and Nadeem Zahawi and Boris Johnson and all these other leading figures in the British government who were out there for months and months, the last couple of months and months, saying we're not introducing vaccine passports, we're not interested in doing that kind of thing. And the government's own studies on this, I read a committee study just 2 days ago that said there can be no justification for this. They don't work. They're just infringements on liberty, and all of the kind of evidence that has come in from around the world where they are being used don't necessarily go to show. And let's be very clear about this, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's not like there's been anybody who has died of Omicron, the variant. And if you look at the statistics coming out of the United Kingdom at the moment, it's not like there is a wild resurgence in deaths, in hospitalizations and so forth. So what prompted Boris Johnson to race these things before Parliament?
Well, as you say, you and I have been warning about Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party. We warned about David Cameron, that he wasn't a proper Conservative. We warned about Theresa May. She wasn't a proper Conservative. We warned about Boris Johnson. Unfortunately, people fall for it time and time again. But sometimes in that milieu, people do reveal their own hand. And another figure that had sort of positioned himself as a Conservative, but we raised concerns about, Andrew Neil, wrote a big piece for one of the major newspapers in the UK, the Daily Mail, inadvertently admitting that we know vaccine passports are not a reliable a device to demonstrate whether people are infectious or not. This is just a way of making life unlivable for anyone that doesn't have one, and therefore forcing them to get one. So it is in effect a vaccine mandate. And beyond that, Boris, in the midst of another scandal, which I don't know if we have time to go into,
loads of time,
let slip that we've got to have a conversation about mandated vaccines as well. This is a British Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party talking about forcing, holding down and forcing people to have a vaccine. When people are adrift from any sense of principle or direction, things can escalate very quickly, and I think that's what we're seeing. It is a tragedy. It's nothing short of a tragedy, and it's particularly frustrating for people like us that have warned about it for so long.
So this is what I want to get into, which is the backdrop of all of this that you allude to, the scandals that have been hitting Number 10 for the last. I mean, I think of them as for the last year, because you have been on this show and you've helped cover those over the last year. I think we did 3 episodes about Carrie Symonds, now Carrie Johnson, the Prime Minister's now wife, earlier this year, and warning about her influence within Downing Street and what she was doing with this power that was not given to her by the public, power that is not, she's not answerable to anybody, but she still seems to be pulling the strings in Downing Street, and she was pulling some fairly interesting strings as far as the British public was concerned over the lockdown period. That appears to be the strings of party poppers. The scandal that rocked Number 10 into this legislative vandalism, I think, to the British Constitution or whatever's left of it, seems to come from Number 10's insistence that different rules apply to them, and specifically different rules apply to Carrie Symonds.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is another extraordinary backstory that your American listeners probably won't believe, but I encourage them to look it up. You had this situation where at the time Boris was campaigning to become leader of the Conservative Party, he had an affair with this much younger woman, 30 years younger, Carrie Symonds. She then fell pregnant. He left his wife, but was still married to his wife, moved, won the leadership election, moved Carrie into Downing Street. She then started, as all reports suggest, to operate as a co-prime minister, to be making hiring decisions for senior government advisors and to be pushing policy, which, there isn't a constitutional role for First Lady in the United Kingdom, and I can assure you she wouldn't fulfill the criteria for it if there was. But to then obviously have someone who is totally unelected and totally unaccountable be very significantly involved in the heart of government is unthinkable. We're not talking about some sort of banana republic. This is the United Kingdom, a parent of democracy. And that's something that's been going on for the last 2 or 3 years, and just successive scandals because of it, as you can imagine. And the latest one is that the government mandated a total lockdown last Christmas. You weren't allowed to see your relatives. If one of your relatives or close friends was dying in hospital, you weren't allowed to see them. Families were separated. And we're told that in Downing Street and in Carrie Johnson's flat, which by virtue of another scandal they decorated at a great cost to the taxpayer and then tried to cover it up, they had 7 separate parties, apparently. And the Prime Minister was under huge scrutiny over these issues, both over the dodgy way he financed the flat refurbishment and all these parties that I think he quite clearly knew were going on.
General abuse of office is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and the sort of this sense it was a sort of imperial court, and very well. I think you coined the name Carrie Antoinette, but that's the image of it. One rule for us, another rule for you. We're engaging in all this debauched partying whilst everyone else is facing hardship. That all blew up this week. And a lot of people suggest that Boris only bought these COVID passports in and started talking about vaccine mandates to distract from that very serious scandal, because now everyone's talking about the fact that we now have to have a passport, to walk down the road.
Well, I think so. I think. I mean, where do you fall on that? Because I think that is right. I do think that Number 10 rushed this to a vote because they were, and for the audience, because I always get questions like this afterwards. Number 10 is like saying the White House. Number 10 Downing Street is the executive part of the British government, where they seem to have miscalculated this, I think, and I hope, Ben, is that, yes, for the next few days, this might be the talk of Sky News and the BBC and the Daily Mail and so on and so forth. But I think people's attentions will turn back to the general malfeasance at the heart of the British government right now. And again, ladies and gentlemen, our guest is Ben Harris-Quinney. He's the chairman of the Bow Group, and you can find more about the Bow Group at bowgroup, BOWGROUP.org. Ben, what do you say to that?
I think there is now a general sense that there is rot, there is something rotten at the heart of the British government, and that stretches across all parties, all political persuasions, people from all walks of life. They're seriously upset. The Conservative Party have plummeted by about 10 points in the polls over the last 2 weeks.
From a leading position into a position beneath the Labour Party.
That's right. And as I say, you've got this major rebellion in Parliament that Boris has seen this evening with 126 of his own MPs not voting with him. So yes, it's hard to see how this all suddenly goes away. The scandals that we mentioned, there are investigations into all of them, and there's also talk of those investigations being interfered with and all that sort of thing. So the whole thing has, a real air of rot over it. And whilst Boris won the largest majority since Thatcher in 2019, he did so because he wrapped himself in the colours of Brexit. He basically stole Nigel Farage's playbook. The problem is, he ain't Nigel Farage.
Well, I think he stole the playbook's cover and put it around his book. And,
exactly.
And once you opened the book, you realised, oh crap, this isn't the sports almanac from Back to the Future. This is the Titty Mag, and very appropriate for Boris Johnson for it to be a Titty Mag as well. So 99 Conservative no's plus 2 tellers, i.e. abstentions in the vote, 101 of his own parliamentary party not voting with him. Let's talk about the future of Boris Johnson here, because it could be all over pretty quickly. The problem I fear, Ben, and you know this better than I think anybody, or have a grasp on this better than anybody, is the way the Conservative parliamentary party works, at what pace it works, what triggers them, and how does it actually have to. What are the mechanisms by which they can remove a prime minister if they fail to have confidence in him or her?
Well, the mechanism is that a number of letters based on the amount of Conservative MPs there are, in this case, I think that would be 55 letters, has to be sent to the 1922 committee, which is a committee that sort of governs internal parliamentary party democracy. At that point, a leadership election is triggered, but that leadership election only takes place within the members of parliament. Within parliament itself, and by the members of parliament. So you're talking about a few hundred people deciding on who the prime minister of the country is. I really don't like the system. It's a terrible system. I might prefer a US system where you have the primaries and the whole public get to see and get a say on the process. But that is the system, and it's how Boris found his way to being prime minister. And I think that is the most realistic way he will be removed. There's a by-election coming up on Thursday, which will be a strong indicator of where he is. It was a very, very safe Conservative seat, and now people are saying they may lose it. I think they'll probably hold on to it, but I think it will be very narrow, and it will demonstrate the swing of support away from Boris and away from the Conservatives. So there is ever greater likelihood of those 55 letters being submitted by disgruntled members of Parliament, of which we know now number over 100, and Boris could well be out within the next few years. The problem is there isn't any. It's not like we have the great hope that is coming through, a genuine Conservative that's going to take us back to the Thatcher days. I think we're now at the point where we need to see an alternative party take us forward over the next few decades.
Well, this was going to be my question. So I have not lived in the UK now for about 5 years, just over 5 years, and I've watched with interest as the kind of the real right wing, Eurosceptic, socially conservative base is kind of splintered into all of these smaller parties. So the UK Independence Party was the vehicle we used to achieve the Brexit vote. Then the Brexit movement itself the campaign itself was split among several different organisations. Then you had Nigel Farage break off from UKIP and found the Brexit Party, which is now called, is it Reform?
That's right, yeah.
And then you have another one now. I don't even know the name of. Then you have Reclaim. So you got Reclaim, Reform. You still have UKIP under the piddling stewardship of Neil Hamilton.
You've got the Heritage. You've got the Heritage Party.
You've got the Heritage Party. You've got the For Britain movement.
Yeah, and you've got the SDP, which is sort of resurgent, particularly among younger people.
So tell the audience. I mean, tell me, quite frankly, what's the real one? You know, what's the real one that people should be throwing their support behind? Is there any way foreseeable that these people all come together under one banner? And is there scope to chip into the Conservative Party's polling numbers like we did back in 2014 and 15 that secured us the Brexit referendum?
Well, your last question first. If those parties can be united, absolutely, and I think it can go beyond that. I wouldn't. Very genuinely, I don't have a favourite among those parties. There's a lot of decent people in all of them. I'm not convinced that they've quite pulled it together and worked out a formula. I don't think any of them have done that. I don't think any of them have the leadership that is required to really make a strong challenge. And I think even with Nigel Farage, the problem was that I think because he grew up in the Thatcher years, there was still and he's said this himself, that he wants the Conservative Party to change. He was hoping that the Conservative Party would come to its senses because of the pressure he placed on them. He stood down, of course, his Brexit Party challengers in 2019 in the hope that the Conservative Party would get a bigger majority.
Against my advice, I'll say.
Yeah, well, we both said at the time that was a very bad idea, because we ain't talking about the Margaret Thatcher Conservative Party getting a big majority. We're talking about what is essentially a left-wing party called the Conservative Party getting a big majority, and we're now seeing the problems that has caused. But the thing with Nigel was, I think he always held on to that residual belief that the Conservative Party could change. I think we've got to wake up to the fact that it is too far gone, that there's just no way to bring the Conservative Party back. There are too many MPs in it that are just the absolute wrong kind of people, and it would take 20, 30 years to turn it around. And
just for the audience there, when Ben says there are too many MPs in it, he means inside the Conservative Party. You're not just using the phrase "in it."
No, I'm not. No, I know that's a phrase.
There are too many MPs in it.
No, I know that's a phrase that people like you like to use, Raheem, but I do not. I don't know where you're from or wherever you're from, but I think that we've now reached that point that that you just can't reset the Conservative Party, and I hope that logic can prevail, and the many different parties that are now formed on the right can come together. But the key thing is always with these things, you need a leader. You need someone that people can rally around. The Nigel Farage was that figure, and frankly, maybe he still is. I don't see anyone better out there that could pull this together than Nigel. And if you can take whatever new group that is to the point of being united, I think you'll be looking at 20-25% of the polls. The Conservative Party would be under huge pressure, and then I think it would still take a long time, but there is a realistic chance that people could finally wake up and see, okay, we're not falling for this con again. We can see these people aren't real Conservatives, and we need a new party to replace them.
Well, I put this into some context for the audience. I tried myself, albeit from a far smaller soapbox, to have this kind of Enoch Powell intervention moment in 1974. Enoch Powell, who's one of my personal heroes, parliamentary Conservative for a very long time before leaving in 1974, was taking aim at the Conservative Party for almost the same reasons, right? The lack of consideration for what the Conservative base in the country, which, as far as I understand history from that period, was the predominant majority of ordinary people, ordinary voters in the United Kingdom, and alongside a whole bunch of other things, including and not limited to the United Kingdom's European Economic Community membership. He turned around and he shocked the nation. I think to a great extent shocked himself by saying, look, you cannot vote for Ted Heath's Conservative Party, and did an endorsement of sorts for the Labour Party, which was the party at the time actually that were offering a referendum on European community membership. And I kind of did this speech with you. I remember you were very sick at the time, and you were even sicker after the speech. It was supposed to be in Parliament. I mean, tell people a little bit about that. It was supposed to be in Parliament, and we ended up getting booted out of Parliament.
Exactly. That was at the point that Theresa May was trying to scupper Brexit. So we had the Brexit vote, but then it took really 5 years to actually get Brexit to happen, because this was a vote of the people, but the establishment and the members of Parliament at the time, and pretty much the members of Parliament still, that made up the Parliament, were 70% against Brexit. So the public voted, and then MPs did whatever they could to try and stop it happening. And there was a particular point that May published her proposals, and that sent the Brexit movement into uproar. We had a Brexit betrayal event, which was scheduled to take place in Parliament. I then received calls from a number of MPs that said, if you were going to be there,
me,
that yes, you, Raheem, that you were not allowed in your Parliament because you're too rebellious.
Insurrectionist. See, I was insurrectioning before the insurrection.
Right, and then they were saying, and so we assume you'll be dropping him from the panel. And I said, no, we won't. We'll be dropping you from the panel. And we had our event very much in the spirit of that rebellion. And ultimately the rebellion worked in the sense that we got rid of Theresa May and her proposals. But again, it comes back to that same old problem that you're just rolling the dice again in a Conservative Party that has very few Conservatives left in it. And so Boris Johnson came up, and we again warned that wouldn't be any better. But people like to believe that things are going to get better, and of course we are now where we are. But I think the point about Enoch Powell is a good one, because if it wasn't for the establishment, Enoch Powell would have been Prime Minister. He was blocked using all of these various machinations that we've discussed about how a leader is selected by parliamentarians rather than by the people,
right.
And all that sort of thing. And I think the same is true of Nigel Farage, and Margaret Thatcher only got through by mistake, that they totally underestimated her. So I think all of this demonstrates Brexit, and everything that's happened since, and indeed much that happened before, demonstrates that we actually need a new democratic system, because Britain is an illusion of democracy, and we are declining because of it, to the point that you've got this sort of tin pot imperial court dictatorship of the Prime Minister and his wife, completely out of touch, and putting through the kind of measures that would embarrass fascist dictatorships. And you wonder where, if something isn't done, where we're going to be in 10 years' time.
Well, that is almost exclusively what I'm wondering at the moment, because as you say, there doesn't appear to be, at least not to me. Maybe I'm too out of touch with the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party's been out of touch with me for long enough. It's about time I gave them some back. I don't know. Are there any members of Parliament who are inside the Conservative Parliamentary Party who you would say I trust them to run the country?
Well, yeah, you've got someone like John Redwood, who was Margaret Thatcher's head of policy and is a senior patron of the Bow Group. It's unthinkable that he would be elected leader of the Conservative Party, but something similar did happen in the Labour Party with Jeremy Corbyn. And so they had, because they changed their rules and put the members in charge of deciding who the leader should be, rather than the MPs, the party members, I mean.
Yeah.
And they selected a very left-wing candidate in Jeremy Corbyn. The problem was that because his party was still full of Tony Blair's MPs, he was the leader, but he couldn't do anything. And I think in the very, very unlikely event that Conservative MPs decided to select a proper Conservative like John Redwood as leader, the problem would then be, what does he do with all of the Liberal Conservatives? You can't fire them. You can't just say, right, we're having a clear out. They're all there, and a lot of them, the Conservative Party switched its policy when Cameron took over in 2005 to basically screen out all Conservative candidates. It's not like in America, the centrality, a little office of bureaucrats, of unelected bureaucrats in London decide who the candidates are going to be. And they've been doing that now for the best part of 20 years, which means that all of the new the Conservative MPs that have come in that period are of that left-wing liberal mindset. And a lot of them, if they're in safe seats, they'll be there for life. They'll be there for another 3-4 decades. So the question is, how do you reset a party like that? And I just don't see the possibility of it. And I think it would actually be quicker now to have a new party come in.
Well, upbeat and optimistic as ever. But I am not in any disagreement with you about the.
Well, that's the problem. We're never. It's like Peter Hitchens. It might be miserable. We're never wrong.
Yeah.
Believe in the new leader if you like, but do so at your peril, because 2 years down the line you'll be exactly where we are now.
Well, and this is really shocking to me, especially because of how much form you and I both have. And by the way, to the audience, Ben and I aren't the only ones, but we are two of the most active ones in this area. And it's really shocking to me that despite our pedigree now, not just in the area of understanding the Conservative Parliamentary Party and all that, we also, the Brexit stuff, the Trump stuff, everything, right? That people will still have this blind faith in people who have shown themselves repeatedly to be of low character, people like Boris Johnson. And so it's galling. We can go on television, we can write all the articles, we can do podcasts, we reach millions upon millions of people every week through all of these different things, whether it's in the UK, in the US, and still there is this longing that I'm trying to get to the bottom of as less of a political thing, more trying to understand psychological and emotionally why people behave this way. You talk about hope and people wanting to hope, but I would want, and I would hope myself, that they would hope for something better than a bumbling shagger who does, quite frankly, one of the most cartoonish Nigel Farage impressions that I've ever seen.
Yeah, you can't even shag a good one either.
Exactly.
A wrong un, I think she was described as by the Prime Minister's former advisor.
And by the way, let's talk about that for a second, because people act as if you can't criticize Carrie Symonds, Carrie Johnson, Carrie Antoinette, whatever you want to call her. They act like you can't criticize it. I mean, you were on the television the other day on this GB News channel, and you were making some pertinent points about where power resides in the executive branch of the British government. And the host of the show, I won't even get into who she is, because we have very many priors, me and that lady, but not like that, of course, but she kind of cuts you off and says, well, actually, Ben, we have to point out to the audience that Carrie isn't here to put her own case forward, which is a ludicrous thing to do, because when you're being discussed on television, when I'm being discussed on television, when Steve Bannon's being discussed on television, when Nigel Farage is repeatedly maligned and defamed and accused all across British television, they don't invite all of us on to have our own say and to pick our own fights back. But when it's Carrie Antoinette, it's a completely different take. And I'm struggling to understand where that comes from. Is she really that well looped in?
No, but I think there is this, whenever we raise this question, there is this sort of sense that in some way it's sexist, and we just don't want a woman in charge, to which I respond to the fact that, yes, the problem is that she was never elected to be in charge of anything. I mean, Carrie Symonds constitutionally should have no more power than a road sweeper. I don't think it's sexist to question why someone that has been totally unelected and is accountable to no one. And on that point, that there is now an investigation into every single Christmas party, apart from the one that she is rumoured to have planned.
Yeah.
So, and the reason for that is that the people involved in all the others can be fired, as someone already has. But when it comes out that she was responsible for one, what is the Prime Minister going to do? Fire his wife? Sanction his wife? It can't happen. And it's the same with all of the other decisions and the involvements that she has in appointments and so forth. If she is found to have done something seriously wrong and illegal, which quite frankly is what all evidence suggests, what on earth is the procedure? Do people come in and haul her out? It's a situation that is not allowed to happen for very good reason. But to your previous point about why does this keep happening, I boil it down to three things. One is the system. We have an illusion of democracy really in Britain. It is a chumocracy. It is, we've had, of the last three prime ministers, two of them were the members of the same 12-man elite dining club from Eton College and Oxford. And so the system doesn't allow that public grassroots support to connect with a candidate. It's all several steps removed, with sort of bureaucrats and MPs making the final decision. So that's one thing. The other thing is that yes, people want to believe. They've had so long since there's been a proper Conservative in charge, that they really want to believe that whatever charlatan has come up and is pretending to be that is going to be the saviour. And the third point is, as we well know, there are no prizes for being right in politics. There are only prizes for supporting the establishment. So we can be right as many times as you want, and yet the people we defeat are the ones that get the top jobs, the ones that get knighted, the ones that get elevated to the House of Lords, as more Remainers were than Brexiteers. So, when people see what we are doing, they might think, yeah, but, I want to become an MP, or I want to get into the House of Lords, so I'm going to carry on with this absolute farce and not stand up to it. Well, that's what it really comes down to. I've said several times that this isn't a banana republic, but maybe it is now. Without the banana, the republic. It's just a farce. It's just a total undemocratic farce posing as a serious country.
I think that probably sums it up. Ben, where can people find more from you, about you, and the Bow Group?
Well, you can find the Bow Group on Twitter and GETTR at Bow Group. You can find me at B_HQ, and you can find us at bowgroup.org.
Ben Harris-Quinney, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The reason I wanted to do this show, well, I think it's probably obvious to you now, is think about how badly it can go. And do not, for a second, think it can't happen to you, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be in the world. I know we have an audience all over the world. I know we have people in the United Kingdom listening to this right now. Maybe you disagree. I would like to hear from you. Feel free to tweet at me or post from GETTR at me. If you're not on GETTR already, it's GETTR.com. It is exploding with members, new people who have found their way away from big tech's oligarchy and are interested in free speech. I'm, delighted to say that many of my friends work at GETTR, and I give it my full-throated support and endorsement wherever I can. I also post things to GETTR that I don't post anywhere else, so make sure you go onto GETTR, GETTR.com, and come and join us there. Honestly, it's a fantastic place. For those of you who care, my book on Enoch Powell from a few years ago now is called Enoch Was Right, because he was, and you can get it in two different ways. You can get it on the internet, on Amazon, Unfortunately, it is Amazon. Or you can go to fundrealnews.com, which is the website that people go to support the National Pulse, our publication, the publication that publishes this podcast that you're listening to right now. Speaking of which, there are some big stories over at the National Pulse today. We've just revealed that Liz Cheney accepted an award from a Chinese Communist Party influence group. Yes, that is correct. All the details at thenationalpulse.com. An amazing opinion piece by Steve Cortez, former Newsmax host and former advisor to President Donald J. Trump, is the lead story at the National Pulse as we record this podcast. An interesting story that we've decided to call a pandemic of the vaccinated, because Omicron appears to be infecting more vaccinated people than unvaccinated people. And another major breaking scoop from the National Pulse. We have new Fauci-Zuckerberg emails that show the two planning to collude over sharing data from Facebook for further lockdowns and vaccine deployment. It's all there at thenationalpulse.com. We work incredibly hard. We're a small team. We work incredibly hard to bring you this news. So if you do have it in you, even if it's just $5 a month, please go on over to fundrealnews.com. You don't have to do a monthly renewed subscription. There is a button at the top of the page that says click here for a one-time donation. But we are 100% reader funded. 100% reader funded. We absolutely rely on you, rely on your support. And just think about all of the things, whether it's the breaking down that timeline from January the 6th, which we were the first to do. I did it from the desk that I'm talking to you from right now. You know, before everybody else came into this, and what a marvelous job that everybody else is doing, the Julie Kellys and the Darren Beatties and everything. We broke that timeline apart. The Fauci links to the Chinese Communist Party and the Wuhan lab and Peter Daszak and all of those revelations, the scalps we've had, kicking people like Daszak and Marion Koopmans off the WHO investigative committee by showing their lack of credibility and their compromise. So many of these stories, and the ones I just read out to you, Liz Cheney, breaking news on the January 6th committee members, all of that, it literally would not happen without your support. So if you're not a member yet, fundrealnews.com is the URL. We now have 3,916 members. I would love to get to 5,000 members by the end of the year, frankly. So if you're not yet there, I'm going to help you get there. There is a promo code that you can use, but get there quickly. It will give you a bit of a discount because we do give swag away for joining at certain tiers of membership. One tier specifically gets you a signed copy of that book, Enoch Was Right. But you can we've been using this promo code. Use this promo code. It's WARROOM, 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 all one word, and you can get 10% off whichever level of support you choose, and you get nice stuff in the mail from us as a result. I wanted to leave you with two things. One is I always read the names out of new members who have joined, so I'll do that in just a second. But I also want to play you this clip that I found last night. I was listening, as I am often want to do, to old Christopher Hitchens' speeches on YouTube. And this part in particular of this speech that he gave to the Nation Institute, I think back in 1996, really stood out to me because, honestly, it's the stuff that I bang on about today. And he puts it way better than I ever could. And that makes me embarrassed, quite frankly. But it just goes to show what an amazing inspiration he was. I want to play this clip of Christopher Hitchens, very short.
Like, I don't know about you, every day I look at the New York Times and see, are they still saying all the news that's fit to print on the front page? Are they still doing that? So, I'm still pissed off with them. Every day I also think, maybe there'll be some encouraging signs of polarization all the same. Because in the New York Times every day you find the word consensus is always used as a plus word. Unity is always used as a plus word. Anything divisive, very bad word. Bipartisan, very good. Partisan, not so good. Cretinism, bullshit, nonsense. The building of a false consensus and the burying of history and the burying of dialectic.
Amazing, isn't it? Just amazing. I heard that last night. I was like, I got to play it for the audience. Once again, it's in the Nation Institute speech. You can find the whole thing on YouTube. Very interesting. He says some very offensive things about right-wingers as well. I've got no problem with it. If you can back your points up, I don't have a problem with it. That's what Hitchens was always so good at. But no wonder the left were so happy to part ways with him, right? When he was saying things that were anti-consensus, pro-division. How dare we have division? We have division, ladies and gentlemen, when one set of ideas are manifestly good and one set of ideas are manifestly evil. And that's what we're living through right now. I'm so grateful for you for tuning in. Please make sure you leave us a review. Share this podcast with your friends, family members, colleagues, onto your social media channels. It really does help. Don't think you're not helping because you've got 30 followers or 100 followers. It really does help. And the people that have helped us out this week, I want to give a shout out to our new members: Ronald, Alberta, Annie, Dan, Edward and Eileen, Tom, Anne, Dr. Yola, VFT, Colby, Tina, Katrina, Alan, Marie, Karen, Kelly, Robert, Walter, Heather, Mark, Dennis, Walter again, Tim, Russell, Craig, Chase, Terry, Michael, Dan, Gregory, Julie, Janet, Tim, Stephen, Michael, Torre, Michelle, Julian, Greg, Joseph, Todd, Catherine, Karen, Mark, Michael, Madeline, Douglas, Joe, Linda, Kevin, Dan, James, Jeanette, James again, Jeffrey, Bob, Rebecca, Julie, Ellen. Thank you all so much. Head on over to thenationalpulse.com, share our stories, fundrealnews.com, leave us a review. I know it's a lot of homework, but come on, we can win civilization back. See you next time.